Okay, well, welcome everybody to day three, the final day of All Hands on Deck, the virtual Apra Maryland conference. We hope that you guys have been enjoying all the great content, and today will be just as great. My name is Teresa Clarke. I'm the Vice President of Apra Maryland, and I really want to take a moment this morning to really thank our sponsors, one of which is Donor Search, who we'll be hearing from in a little bit, but then also iWave and also Maryland Nonprofits. It's because of their sponsorship that we've been able to offer this for free this year, which I know we've gotten some feedback has been amazing for people, especially in smaller shops, the people that don't really have a budget. So we just really thank our sponsors for letting us continue to offer all this content. Before I go ahead and introduce our speakers today, I'm going to pass it over to Nestor, who's going to do our first giveaway of the day.
Good morning and welcome again. The first giveaway is brought to us by Maryland Nonprofits, and it looks like we have 43 people in the room. So random number generator, winner is number 36. 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, 36. Garrett or Jared Reitzma, you are our winner. This one was brought to us by Maryland Nonprofits, one of our 3 sponsors that Teresa just mentioned. Thanks so much, and I'll hand it back to Teresa.
Thank you, Nestor. Congratulations on winning, Garrett. So let me go ahead and introduce our speakers for this first session. Nathan and Scott from Donor Search Aristotle. They'll be presenting on Pandora for Prospects, Personalized Prospecting in the Age of AI. So just a few details about them. Nathan is a thought leader and public speaker and is one of the world's foremost experts on the intersection between artificial intelligence and philanthropy. With a personal vision to help inspire a worldwide increase in generosity, Nathan presented the first TEDx on the topic of artificial intelligence in the future of generosity. Nathan currently serves as Senior Vice President of Donor Search Aristotle. Now for Scott, for the past 10 years, Scott's professional career has solely been focused on fundraising analytics, and he currently serves as Associate Vice President of Donor Search Aristotle, leading a research and development division dedicated to leveraging artificial intelligence to help nonprofits harness actionable insights from big data. He received his undergraduate degree from Elon University, North Carolina, and his master's degree in psychology at Loyola. Take it away, Nathan and Scott.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's always so awkward when we have these little intros, but we know a lot of you and a lot of you know us. And so we're just happy to be here and honored to spend a little bit of time with you this morning. Hope you've had a great conference, and we're excited about this presentation. It's actually a new approach for us. Scott and I do a lot of presenting together, but it's a new approach based on feedback that we've gotten through other conferences about wanting to get in the weeds a little bit more and talk about how AI is actually being used in both the private sector and the nonprofit sector. So we will just dive in. As far as any questions, please ask questions in the chat. We will monitor those. We are going to try to speed along as quickly as possible so that we have time for questions at the end, which I'm sure there'll probably be some based on all the information we're going to shove at you through a fire hose. But let's just dive in. All right, so we've titled this Pandora for Prospects, but we are fully aware, and we're hip to, that most of you don't use Pandora. It just happened to rhyme, and so we picked it. We thought of the other alternative title, Spotify for Suspects. It turns out, actually, in our research, that Pandora still has 55 million subscribers, so who would have thought? So there's probably 1 or 2 of you that are still using Pandora, but regardless of which you use, I actually use Apple Music. The idea that you no longer have to have a box of cassette tapes or whatever it might be, or CDs, and flip through them to figure out what you're going to listen to, because these AI applications do that for you with really high accuracy. All right, so here we go. Scott and Nathan, you already know us. Donor Search, I think you probably have heard a lot about Donor Search over the last couple of days. Obviously, Donor Search is a very proud sponsor of Apra Maryland. It's been really near and dear to the hearts of leadership at Donor Search for a long time. Scott and I have been with Donor Search since December, actually coming on 1 year of last year, so right at the tail end of 2020. But we were Donor Search partners before, as we were building machine learning models over the last several years, we were consuming about 250 million records a year from donor search. So we've built a lot of our work over the past 4 or 5 years has been built using donor search data and client data. But of course, donor search is a family-run company with over 7,000 clients now, and lots of integrations with all the popular CRMs. So that's pretty much the most of the pitch you're going to get, because we want to get into the good stuff. So again, based on feedback that Scott and I have had over the last year or so, as we do kind of run the circuit and do presentations on different aspects of AI and big data, we're going to actually talk less about the generosity crisis today and why this is needed, but more about the world that we wake up into every day and how that world is just surrounded by data, that you're creating and curating data everywhere you go, and then how that data is being used, and then eventually how it applies, how it can apply to the nonprofit sector. So a lot of you have heard statistics over the last 10 years about how much, all the data that is created today is more than, for the first 200 years of human existence or whatever it might be. But the change here is that the amount of data that's being collected and created is accelerating so fast, so that 90% of all data that's ever been created has been created in the last 2 years. That number will only decrease in terms of the time span. So because more and more organizations will show you where this data is coming from, are creating data at exponential rates. So we can only expect that this statistic in a few years will be 90% of all data that's been created will be in 1 year, in the last 1 year, or 6 months. I mean, it's just phenomenal how that is changing. But a couple other statistics just to highlight like how imperative this conversation is, but also how robust. Social media accounts for 33% of time spent online. So as far as you're thinking about donors and getting to know donors, think about the treasure trove of data that exists in social media. And some have success in that and some have not. But the reality, if you and I are spending a third of our time in social media, we're putting our hearts and dreams and aspirations and frustrations in a media content where data exists. Google gets 3.5 billion searches daily, and it would take a person approximately 181 million years to download all the data from the internet, which is astounding. A couple more, that 95% of businesses cite the need to manage unstructured data as a problem. This is probably 99% for nonprofits. Essentially, when we think about what organizations are using contact reports, unstructured data, so just written text in a contact report about a visit, how many are using that data in any type of natural language processing? We'll describe a bit more what that is, but using that in an AI format to essentially make predictions or insights. So 97.2% of organizations are investing in big data and AI. We have a slide in a little bit of showing where that is in the nonprofit sector. Internet users generate 2.5 quintillion bytes of data every day, and poor data costs the economy 3.1 trillion. So this is no longer something that is, a future thing where the data is going, we don't have enough data, the data is not structured enough, or it's not clean enough. Data is costing organization lots and lots of money. And Scott has an example of Netflix and how much Netflix saves every year by deploying AI to essentially avoid analysis paralysis. The same is true for nonprofits that essentially interact with donors that have lots of choices. So how are you using this data to avoid this analysis paralysis and fine-tuning your messaging or fine-tuning an algorithm to the right person at the right time for your organization? So just in thinking about where data comes from, this is a report. Everyone should download this because it's fascinating, from Domo. It's a free report every year that they do. And essentially what it says is that every minute of every day, this amount of data is basically curated by all these different sources. So Google is 5.7 million searches every minute. Snapchat users send 2 million Snapchats every minute. The interesting thing about this, when you look at it over a kind of a time trajectory, is that there are things that exist now that didn't even exist a year ago, like Clubhouse creating 208 rooms per minute was something that wasn't even on the report. So more and more and more organizations are are basically part of this arms race to curate and to collect more data to either use for themselves or to sell or do other things with it. Every person generates 1.7 megabytes every second, every person on Earth. So that's the total, 1.7 megabytes every second. We're generating lots of data right here on this Zoom call. And Zoom has made out very well because of that, given the big influx to virtual meetings last year. Every 8 seconds, someone creates a new profile in donor search, which is amazing because we generate all of our profiles in real time. They're not built in static and sit in a data warehouse. They're built in real time. Every 8 seconds, 24/7, someone builds a new profile in donor search. And then essentially, talking about where this data comes from. We are happy to send this deck to anyone who wants to see this after and go through it. Scott's going to talk more about the key areas of AI, so you get a better understanding of that. And then we're going to dive in a bit deeper on some use cases.
Great. Thanks, Nathan. So just a few examples of how AI and machine learning are being used, some that you might be familiar with, some you might not be as familiar with. So natural language processing, I'm not going to read the definitions, you can read them, but think of Alexa or Siri or Google Assistant, anything that's taking speech to text or text to speech. If you use Gmail and it does autocomplete on your sentences, or use Grammarly and it changes the grammar of your sentences, it's understanding the context of what you're writing and trying to improve it or amplify it. So robotics, that's something more along the lines of things that are used in manufacturing. Boston Dynamics, they create robots for security and manufacturing as well. Amazon has their own robots, both for warehouses, but now they just released a robot that people can buy to kind of follow them around the house, similar to what you would see in the Jetsons. And then image recognition. So this is Google Lens. You can open up the camera on your phone, hover it over text that's in Spanish, and it'll translate it into English or, excuse me, any other language you would want right there in your camera. Or you can hover it over a plant and it'll identify what plant it is and bring you to the Wikipedia page. Or Apple Photos has facial recognition, which is a component of image recognition, and it'll categorize all of the people that you've taken pictures of into groups of those individuals. So you can look at one of your parents or your spouse and find all the pictures of them. And it's just based on the algorithms identifying similar facial patterns and facial recognition. So real quickly, before we go to the next slide, if not by show of hands, but by show of emoji in the chat, just a quick, if you've interacted with one of these, probably within the last week or last 2 weeks, just throw an emoji in the chat. I know I use Alexa or Siri probably every day. We have about 7 Alexas in the house, which my wife hates most of them, but I can't turn on the lights without using Alexa. All right, so we got a bunch there. How about this? By show of emoji, how many of you have trained one of these models? It looks like the emojis have stopped. An immediate stop. All right, let's go to the next slide. Actually, most of you have trained these models. So anytime you use an Alexa, you're giving it feedback, right? If you get frustrated, Alexa now can understand your tone. So if you get frustrated because it didn't understand, it's taking that as feedback. Or sometimes it'll say, did I answer your question? You can give it a vehement no, or say, yes, you did. It all takes that into the algorithm. Anytime you drive a Tesla or test drive one of your friends' Teslas and really kind of punch that thing, it learns how to drive safely and more safely than a human would. And then that image on the right, I just found out this week that Google owns these. So anytime you go to create an account, you have to prove that you're not a robot. Google has that and uses that to help their Google Maps feature, their autonomous driving feature. And then the ones where you have to type in the text, they're using that to transcribe old newspapers and old books and transcribe handwriting. So you're improving these models on a day-to-day basis without even realizing it.
Well, I just saw Connor's comment about Alexa holding a grudge. We were joking the other day that the robots are going to eat me first because of my frustration when I talk to Alexa when she doesn't do something that I want her to do. So you know what?
I don't know that one.
Check that out. That was my Alexa. So she's listening.
Just keep track of you, Nathan.
100%. Another thing, I actually just found this yesterday. There's an app called Speechify, if you haven't used it, that reads websites to you, emails to you. It's an app and a web portal, but they have Gwyneth Paltrow's voice. So actual voice has been programmed as a premium feature. So I can have all my articles read by Gwyneth Paltrow now, which is pretty cool.
So, I mean, there's millions of examples of for-profit organizations that are huge in their space using big data, AI, and ML. We're just going to talk through a couple, but they're all using it for the same purpose. They all use it. The more data, the better their models are, which allow them to increase accuracy, consistency, and speed. So you can see that when you go into Amazon and they recommend what you should buy, usually they know what I want to buy better than I know what I want to buy. Sometimes I just go there and say, let's see what you think I should purchase. And oftentimes I'm leaving there with stuff in my cart. The more that any of these products understand me and can predict what I need before I even realize I need it, the more satisfied I am as a customer. So the more I'm going to stay with them, right? People switch from Pandora to Spotify because Spotify had a larger catalog. People then switch from Spotify to Apple Music because Apple Music is integrated with everything else. So the more they can keep you and retain you, the better it is for their own pocket. And then it's also better for you as well. So like Nathan mentioned earlier, Netflix is saving $1 billion a year because of their big data and AI projects. They use it in marketing, they use it in content creation, they use it even in identifying which thumbnail should be shown for you based upon your previous watching patterns. So if you like comedies and Good Will Hunting is being shown, it might show Robin Williams. But if you like romance and Good Will Hunting is recommended, it might show Minnie Driver and not Ben Affleck, Matt Damon. So it's interesting the way they use it to identify and help keep you engaged as much as possible. So we'll just go through a couple of these. If you go to the next one, Amazon, again, we've already talked about it probably 4 times on this presentation alone, but Amazon has over 200 million Prime subscribers. What's interesting about them is when they started, their competitors were Barnes & Noble and Borders, 2 stores which I can't even remember the last time I saw one of them open, right? And then they moved where their competitors were Target and Walmart because they started selling more products. But now if we look at them, their competitors are Microsoft, Google, Apple, Sony, IBM. They cover almost every spectrum you can think of. They're predicting what you're going to buy. They're predicting what you're going to listen to, what you're going to watch, what you're going to read, what you're going to eat. They have stores, these Amazon Go stores, where there's no registers, there's no line. You just go in, scan a QR code, walk around, pick whatever you want off the shelf and walk out. And it has, with facial recognition and image recognition, can accurately charge you for whatever products you walked out of the store with. They have AR salons where you can sit down in a salon, try different hairstyles, hair colors, all through augmented reality in the mirrors. They have primary care facilities, so they're learning about healthcare, about medication. I mean, I could go on and on with all this, but they have over 2,000 patents that were granted last year alone, and that's an increase year over year, that they just see a need, see an area where they can grow and improve, and they have the data to do so and jump right into it before a lot of other people are.
Interestingly enough, too, Amazon is now run by the former CEO of AWS, Amazon Web Services. So Amazon as a company has essentially declared that they are a data company, not a consumer products company. So it's just a fascinating thing. The other thing is that the algorithms that Amazon uses today when I buy something on my app, it's the same algorithm that they started with 20 years. It shows the advantage, 20 years ago, it shows the advantage of starting an AI and retraining an AI over and over and over and over and over again, to the point that Amazon knows me so well that they patented this, I guess, a couple of years ago, right, Scott? That they will start the shipping process on a product before I actually hit the buy button. Their same algorithm that's gotten to know me so well since I started working with it however long ago, or buying stuff from it so long ago, knows me so well that if I click through a page, if I read a review, or if I go back or I go forward, that they're so confident that I'm going to end up buying that product that they'll ship it to the closest warehouse so that I get it faster. it's pretty amazing technology and showing the true power of how AI can really start to do real-time, very accurate predictions.
Google's obviously another big one. They have 6 million searches per minute. I think that's 100,000 searches every second. So millions and millions of searches have already happened since we've been on this webinar. But they're obviously collecting data. They just know a lot about your conversational history through either WhatsApp or, I'm sorry, WhatsApp is Facebook, through your phone messages or through Gmail. They know your search history through using their platform. They know your demographic information. They know your location through Google Maps, you know, when you're home versus when you're not home, both through Google Maps and Nest. So they're using all of this to personalize search results for you. So if you go in and start writing a question in the Google search bar, the recommendations that they have or the way that they auto-complete that suggestion are based upon what's going on today, just in the world, also what's going on around where you are, what's going on with your recent search history. So if you use the same words to start typing that whatever question you're asking in the search bar 6 months from now, the recommendations will be different because it's a completely different world at that point. You might be in a different place. Your search history might have changed. So it's never static. It's always updating, learning, improving, and taking into context real-time analysis. And they use it in such interesting ways with Google Duplex. And I think this is one of the most fascinating. They use natural language processing to mimic the language patterns of a human. So you could say to your Google Assistant, you know, make a reservation for my wife and I at the local restaurant for 8 p.m. on Friday. It'll call that restaurant with a robot, with an automated system, and use ums and uhs and pauses to sound like a human and not sound like a robot, so that it can speed through the process and you don't have to pick up your phone, your reservation will be made. So it's kind of dumbing itself down to pass as a human instead of anytime you call an automated service and you know it's a robot. I usually get more frustrated because I just want to talk to somebody, but they're figuring out ways to get past that as well. Pandora, again, we've talked about Spotify, we've talked about Apple Music, but Pandora really kind of set the stage for this music programming and curated playlists. They still have 55 million active users, so they're hanging on, right? But what they did was they brought in musicologists, which is what they call them, experts in production, music production, or composing, and musicians they brought in, and they analyzed their whole catalog. I think they have 60 million songs now. They analyzed their whole catalog across over 450 unique attributes: genre, length, tone, pitch, instruments that are being used, all these different components to analyze every single song that they have and allow that being fed into the model to understand what you like and what you don't like. So you can thumbs up a song or thumbs down a song, and it'll learn from that. And the more you use this model, just like any other machine learning model, the better it's going to be for you specifically. So you'd be hard pressed right now, especially those that are still using Pandora, to find anyone else in the world who has the same recommendations and same curated playlist as you do, because it's taking into not just your history, but if you created that account with Facebook or Google, it knows all that other data on you as well: your demographic, your search history, albums that you purchased, books that you purchased, and so on.
There's some great questions and insights in the, I can't help but look in the chat. We are living in this matrix environment. I mean, the reality is that these technologies that we're talking about are not new. The Google Duplex has been around for several years. They're just getting better. And essentially the part about this is that I see, and I've seen the nonprofit sector essentially try to say, well, fundraising is an art, not a science. We need to just stick with that. This is the reality. The reality is that nonprofits will be seen as less efficient, will eventually seen as more obsolete if we can't compete and operate in a type of efficiency that the private sector does. So we're trying to set the stage here. It is pretty horrifying. And yes, by the way, anything that you put in your browser is bleeding into your real lives. I keep separate profiles. So when I'm browsing for work, it's a completely separate profile than what I do for my personal life. We won't even talk about Facebook on here because we're not allowed without Scott and I getting super upset about how data is being used in probably nefarious ways. But essentially, if you have any Facebook application on your phone, your entire phone is now a listening device for Facebook. So that's all we'll say about it. We can't, otherwise we'll do an hour about Facebook.
Before I jump into Zoom, Elaine Riley made a comment trying to mess with Amazon from now on when buying a product. So that's actually what people are doing. It's called data poisoning. And there are people, for an example, if you're a young family and you have little children, you have a lot of lullabies in your Pandora playlist, when they leave the house, if they want to do data poisoning, they'll put on heavy metal full blast and just listen to it on repeat. They're not home, so it doesn't impact them, but it impacts the algorithm. So now other families who are listening to Pandora, they might get heavy metal blasting 3 o'clock in the afternoon, right? Which means that those people using Pandora aren't going to want to listen to it anymore, and so on. So data poisoning is a way to fight the system on all this data tracking and data collection.
And this is the last other example.
Yeah, so Zoom, I mean, we all have our favorite platforms. I'm personally a Teams guy, but Zoom really killed it with the horrible analogy. Zoom really did a great job with the pandemic, right? In terms of being successful and being prepared to take advantage of everyone moving to a virtual platform. They already had their own servers set up. They were already using artificial intelligence. I think they were one of the first ones to move to the virtual backgrounds. I know Teams took a long time to get there, but just to show an example of their peak, they were downloaded 600,000 times in one day, and they grew 20-fold over a month in terms of daily meeting participants. But they're tracking, think about what you're doing now in Zoom that 2 years ago you weren't doing. Every meeting with your staff is pretty much in Zoom or one of those platforms. Meetings with your prospects are in these platforms. Even galas, even your events are now virtual. So before, when you would go to lunch with a prospect, you're sitting down with them, Google Maps might know you're there, your credit card company might know you were there, but that's about it that was tracked. If you were good and you put that information into Razor's Edge knows you were there, but that's about it. Now with Zoom, they know exactly when you joined the conversation, when your prospect joined the conversation, when your prospect left the conversation. They can transcribe all the text. They can do sentiment analysis, so they can see if your prospect was annoyed or curious or excited or engaged or paying attention to you. All this can be tracked, and all of these meetings that you have, I spend nearly 6 hours a day on a regular day in Zoom or Teams or GoToMeeting. So all that information that wasn't being tracked before is now being tracked. And you can download, we're using transcriptions right now, but you can download a summary report. So it's not just the actual text that was said, but it's a summary highlighting and bulleting out all the key components, and then showing out of this many attendees, this many were engaged for X number of minutes. It's incredible the amount of stuff that you can do and we're just using it because it's more convenient and allows us to interact still when we're not allowed to work in an office.
Yeah, but until Zoom could put a virtual tie on me, I'm not going to be a believer. I want the virtual tie. It's got to come here someday soon. All right. Awesome comments in the chat, by the way. It's great that a lot of you are wanting to learn more. There's a recent book that Scott and I both just read. It came out a few months ago. It's called 2041. It's probably the best scientific fiction book on AI, how big data is being used. It's written to essentially predict what the world will look like in 2041, so 20 years from now, with essentially 85% accuracy. The person who wrote it used to run Google China. He's a foremost expert. It's definitely worth reading, and a fun read as well. So as we're talking about all this stuff in the private sector, I mean, you're interfacing with it every day. You can't avoid it unless you're going to literally just go off the grid. Which is tempting probably after that whole kind of dystopian, conversation we just had. The nonprofit sector has largely kind of put their head in the sand. I started presenting on AI probably 5-6 years ago. And honestly, people were like, ready to key my car. Like, what are you doing here? Like, fundraising is an art. Like, this doesn't apply to us. But the reality is the nonprofit sector has come a long way. We're seeing lots of use cases. We'll share a couple. But we've done a report in collaboration with Powered By and Neon the last 2 years that really assesses, what's the readiness of the nonprofit sector to adopt AI. The numbers are not surprisingly going up. More and more people are saying they've seen visible results of AI. 75% of people believe that AI has made their life easier. And really, 90% of innovators and early adopters believe it's made their life easier. It's a big difference from where we were 5 years ago, when honestly, I think I presented at a conference maybe 5 years ago, and I was asked, well, what's an actual use case of someone using AI in the nonprofit sector? And the reality was there were none. Like, so there's a lot of differences, and we're seeing a lot of this, show up in different news articles. It's hard to get away with, but some real tangible examples of how AI is being used to help improve the human condition, to help organizations raise money. It's not just about the fundraising side. It's also about, doing things that nonprofits couldn't do on their own otherwise. I was talking with someone a week ago that deals with refugees and finding refugees in places like Afghanistan. And they used to have field workers that would have to go and literally just go like village to village and ask, have you seen someone, and carry a picture with them. And they were, on average, they were able to find one refugee every 10 days. And now with AI and an iPad, they're able to essentially find around 10 refugees per day. So, I mean, massive, massive differences in saving lives in human condition. There's things like University of Maryland, who delivered a kidney with a drone 2 years ago for the first time, that while someone's on an operating table waiting for a life-saving procedure, to not have to transport it through hallways and elevators and busy streets and traffic, be able to go rooftop to rooftop. And then my favorite is an organization called Zipline in Northern California that delivers blood in Rwanda and Ghana through a drone. They launch a drone with a packet of blood that's been called by a cell phone. Someone needs a specific type of blood, and they need a certain amount of blood in an area that you could not get a car to, at least efficiently. A drone flies over, it calculates the wind, all of that information, delivers or drops the blood with a parachute, and it lands directly in the clinic. And ever since they've started, they've not had any spoilage of blood, any waste since they started. So they're contracting with the entire country. Look it up, it's amazing. It's called Zipline. Watch a video. But there's so many examples how in climate change and hearing impaired and sight impaired and tracking endangered animals, that AI is absolutely making in this case, a more utopian future, where it's allowing nonprofits to become much more efficient. And it's not just nonprofits. The for-profit sector is starting to get into the space as well. Google Impact Challenge has really doubled down on providing money and resources, consulting, server time for nonprofits that have innovative ideas. Microsoft Philanthropies is the same thing. If you have a great AI idea, don't think that you have to pay for it on your own. Write a proposal, get some funding, because there's a lot of money out there and a lot of desire to see AI do well. OpenAI is an example of that. It started out as a nonprofit. It's converted to a for-profit because Elon Musk found a way to add another zero to his bank account. But essentially, it is open source AI for anyone that wants to use these AI libraries in different contexts. And then one of the exciting progressions in AI has been the United Nations Social Development Goals are essentially long-reaching, very important goals for humanity, that they have an entire initiative around AI. And if you go to the YouTube and follow the AI for Good playlist, they release new videos like every week on different aspects. So whether it's, I mean, it could literally be anything from climate change to, I can't even think of, there's so many different examples to, extreme hunger. And just really interesting to see, like, the future is now, like this is all happening today. But AI is far from perfect. And we're going to get into a real practical example. It's been a couple minutes in our part of this presentation. When an AI bot was asked to write a script after only watching 1,000 hours of a Hallmark Christmas movie. So this person online is notorious for doing this. He'll say, watch 1,000 hours of Olive Garden commercials and come up with a script for a new commercial. Or in this case, 1,000 hours of Hallmark Christmas movies. This is a timely conversation in our household right now, because I have a hard, fast rule that my wife can't watch Hallmark Christmas movies until December 1st. And I know as soon as I leave, like, she's turning them on, like this is battle. But this is what the AI came up with. Single mother refilling snow globes with Christmas juice while thinking that her twins need a double dad. Enter a Hallmark hot businessman and father of twins who wants to turn the young widow's land into an oil resort on Christmas Day unless they go on dates. Scott and I agreed that this is actually a movie that we would both watch, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We would totally watch this movie. Maybe not the other ones, but it's funny after watching 1,000 hours. And actually, you could download the script for this movie. It's hilarious. If you just type in AI Christmas, Hallmark Christmas movie. But we're going to give you an example of how typical traditional machine learning works. And in pretty much every case, often we're asked like, well, this sounds great, but it just is so complicated. Can you explain it in a way that, you know, I can understand? So we came up with this idea of something that, again, is a little bit more timely, that maybe you're kind of wondering the same thing. But we were talking about the dinner table the other day, and we're just wondering, like, how would you predict who's inclined to watch Hallmark movies? What would the process be? Like, how inclined is Scott to watch a Hallmark movie versus, you know, anyone else on this call? So this is the way we're going to start. We're going to break down the machine learning process for you in a real simple, easy to use human terms. So we start out with a question. We have to have a question, and it really is an answer of like, you know, are you likely to watch or are you not likely to watch? It's very definable target. So to do that, we need a population of people that watch Hallmark movies and a population of people that don't watch Hallmark movies. And the reason we put equally diverse here, don't get hung up on it, but feel free to ask questions if you want to talk about diversity and bias. That's a whole probably hour presentation we can talk, and we can answer some things on that. But most importantly, if you had a column of people that, or a flag that was yes or no, that's all we need. We need a population of people that watch Hallmark movies, and we need a population of people that don't. We need data on those people. So once we have the list of people that do and don't, we need data. Now, finding data is a really important part, and finding data that essentially is holistic enough that it's not extremely biased is important. So the one thing about machine learning, because it consumes so much data, it actually helps remove some bias by not just betting on 10 things. So we want as much data as we could possibly find about every one of those watchers and every one of those non-watchers. So we were kind of messing around the other night talking about, well, what data do you need, you know, to figure out if someone's going to watch a Hallmark movie or not? And we're like, well, age probably has something to do with it. Whether you're married probably definitely has something to do with it. Probably married number of years has something to do with it too. And things, more practical things. Are you a cable subscriber? What's your zip code? Are you a homeowner or renter? Number of bedrooms. We actually find number of bedrooms show up in a lot of our AI algorithms, which is interesting. Education, certainly probably number of children. Have you watched them before? So viewing habits, of course, is a very strong telltale sign. Means that you have built up that tolerance for really bad scripts and inconsistent, you know, movie themes. But and also probably things like ancillary, like more consumer type things, like what magazines do you read? Do you read Car and Driver, or do you read Better Homes and Gardens? I bet you there's a correlation there. Just guessing. We haven't done this algorithm, but we probably should actually, just for fun. So you need as much data as you can, and that data can be partially your data. In Hallmark's case, it could be their subscriber data would be theirs, right? They would know how many people have downloaded the app, if there is one. I don't even think there is one, but download the app. And if they have an app, it's like, how many times have they clicked on it? How much have they watched through it? But then they would also farm out other data. They'd want some of the demographic data and the consumer data. What credit cards do they have? They may even get into like what kind of cars people drive. From there, we basically, that's the majority of the model build, is collecting all the data, aggregating all the data on the watchers and non-watchers. The machine learning, and this is really a deep learning kind of function, is that the model itself will take all those attributes and find the correlations of the people that watch and correlations of the people that don't watch. It will take every data point it can find about the watchers and say, these are all the things that watchers have in common with one another. They've got X number of kids, they drive a Prius, and they read Better Homes and Gardens. I'm just guessing, I don't know. Forgive my bias. There's probably there is a lot more breadth in people who watch Hallmark movies, and I watch my fair share, maybe not by choice, but because I've been married 25 years. Those that don't watch maybe have other correlations between the non-watchers. So essentially, that's all it is. It's matching up how many things that watchers have in common with one another, how many things that non-watchers. That's essentially how a deep learning model gets built. But how you score is the next phase of it. The real advantage of this machine learning piece is it can take that algorithm, all those correlations, and apply it to a population that you don't know if they watch or don't watch. So if you're going to look at an entire region of the country, you don't know if they watch or don't watch. Taking that algorithm that's based on this diverse group of people with a lot of data, you can apply that algorithm to a fairly large universe and get fairly high predictions on whether or not someone is likely to watch a Hallmark movie. And I think if Scott need to quit we have to quit our day job, we're going to go apply at Hallmark, because I think we nailed this thing. So we're going to, from that point, everything that we just shared with you, and this is something that's new for us today, because we're often asked, like, how does this actually work? We're going to apply it to the same exact scenario to whether someone is likely to make a donation or not.
And I know we only have a few more minutes, so I want to make sure we have room for questions. We'll go through this pretty quickly because it mirrors exactly that Hallmark example, Nathan and I's side project, pretty closely. So obviously in our world, we don't work for Hallmark. You're not trying to build algorithms for Hallmark or working on their marketing team. We all want to know collectively who's inclined to make a philanthropic gift, right? So if that's our target question, we need two categories of people. We need those that have made a gift. If you could jump to the next slide, those that have made a gift versus those that haven't. You can't build a model of predicting who's going to make a gift if you only show the model donors, because it doesn't know the difference. So by giving them the two different categories of individuals and giving them all the data that's indicative, both directly related to giving, so giving history, but also indirectly related. So that demographic, that consumer information, whether they subscribe to, again, Better Homes and Gardens or Motor Trend, wealth indicators, the size of their home, how long they live in their home, how many homes they have, moves data, the interactions between the philanthropy team, the foundation staff, and the prospects, online engagement. Are they interacting with the organization on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and so on? Are they opening emails? Are they attending events? Are they volunteering? All that information, no matter how far removed it is from making a gift, it still has a connection. And these types of models are able to assess all of it and spit out what isn't related, or remove rather what isn't related, and hold on to the data points that do have an impact on likelihood to give. So we find these correlations by plugging in all this data, where you can use up to thousands of data points, pretty much unlimited data, and these models will go deeper into analysis than if we were to grab the 30 best fundraisers that we know, put them in a room with a whiteboard for a week. Those 30 fundraisers would never be able to get to the level of depth of data that these models can get to, because they're thinking about the high level data points. They just don't have that type of analysis that these algorithms can replicate. And so they're going into not just a board member or not a board member is likely to make a gift, or you get 2 points for if you made a gift in the last 6 months versus those that haven't. It goes down to individualized scoring. So Nathan and I could have the exact same giving history to an organization, the exact same engagement, but because we have two different demographics, we might have two different scores, right? Because it's taking all that into account, kind of like a decision tree. So the next slide, once you have these predictions, that's all well and good, but then you want to score everyone, right? You can't just work on old predictions, because old predictions are based on old data. So you need to plug in regular data on an ongoing basis. Again, the Amazons, the Googles, the Apples, they're collecting data every second of the day to be able to spit out better predictions and more accurate predictions moving forward. So using the data of what's happened in the past, backwards looking, you're able to throw in up-to-date data and use those correlations and those trends and characteristics to predict, again, whatever the question is. In this case, identifying who's inclined to make a philanthropic gift.
Yeah. And I know we're pretty much out of time. There's actually, I'm going to skip just 2 slides because we don't want to get too deep into it, but essentially we wanted to articulate, it's one thing to have an algorithm and have scores. It's another thing to be able to use it. And I think one of the things that we find in nonprofits and that try to apply new technology is that it actually creates more analysis paralysis. the reality is that Alexa and Amazon is so successful because they've made AI accessible. They made it so easy to interact with. It's become part of your home, or your phone is become something that you can't live without almost. So it's really about as much about the application of the technology, and we deal with this on a daily basis with our clients. It's about how the user is going to interface with the data, how it's actionable, not just how accurate it is. So you want to definitely have both ends of the spectrum. We happen to have I think, an Alexa version of prospect development. If anyone wants to see it, we'd be happy to show you. But really, you can't just look at the algorithm and data for data's sake. You have to look at how that data manifests itself into the real world. And that's, I think, all she wrote. Here's our contact information. We love engaging with Apra folks, and really importantly, want to thank you for all your hard work, because working in nonprofit, having done this for 22 years, working for nonprofit, it is absolutely a calling, and not just a job. So just on behalf of Donor Search, we want to thank you for all of the work that you do to help make the world a better place.